Ary Rosenbaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about why changing payroll providers is a 401k event. And we'll talk about my history about me and payroll providers. Anyway, first things first, go to that 401ksite.com, sign up for Chicago, April 16th, May 5th, Colorado. We should have been sending some checks to my buddy Larry, so we should have some guest names for those events. Like I said, go to that 401ksite.com. I think within a month or so, I should be finalizing a date for the National Virtual Conference, which, if you go on YouTube, the one from the end of January is available online. And of course, the books, that 401k Plan Provider Handbook, Full Circle, available on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle. So let's get to the topic at hand. And I think people know my history about payroll providers and TPAs. I started my practice in 2010, which next month will be 16 years, which is hard to believe. You look at my career, whatever, now more than half my career has been spent working on my own. And the longest position I had before that, I was at Geller Group as the lead attorney for almost 5 years. So nobody can complain that I've been changing jobs a little bit too often. There was that case between 2007 and 10 where I was working at 3 different places. And then the Rosenbaum Law Firm, so I guess it's 4. But needless to say, that's a thing of the past. And I want to say, if you read the books, and if you haven't, starting to practice was difficult. I was talking it over with my buddy Dean Venturi yesterday at lunch, and just doing the math in my head and how I can make it work. And there was a struggle at the beginning, and I got attached to, I found out about this company called JD Supro that would take my articles and kind of help distribute them and whatnot. And I started writing weekly articles, and one of the first ones that really, within about maybe 6 to 8 months, that really took off was my little criticism about payroll provider TPAs. And, I've always felt that they haven't done a good job. And I've written an article annually since then. Usually now it's in June. So in June 2026, you'll get another version of that article. And, it's cost me a lot of business, I guess. Payroll provider TPAs are not necessarily going to recommend me for a job when you're, criticizing them. But the fact is that, all these years I have never had the experience that they've improved the way they work. And I just had recently now with an advisor and a client, and the payroll provider TPA really not helping the plan sponsor out in a 410B corrective action that needed to be taken. They just took the lazy way out. But I'm a person that can change their opinions. Listen, the first time I saw Guns N' Roses, I'm like, oh, that's awful. And of course, Guns N' Roses is like one of my top 10 bands. I can change my opinion, and they haven't given me the choice to the chance to change my opinion. And the more you go, I think when I first started writing the articles, I said, well, payroll's that got nothing much to do with 401k plans. And at the time, I think that was right. But we now see that payroll and compensation is one of the most predictable errors coming out of a 401k plan, because if the payroll data is crap, everything else is crap. And when a plan sponsor, they change payroll providers the way, I had to replace dishwashers as a certain, to a certain point. It felt like there was a point like every 4 or 5 years I was replacing a dishwasher. But, that's how plan sponsors act. They unplug the old one, slide it out, put the new one in, and suddenly everything runs better until it doesn't. And unfortunately, switching payroll providers is like rewiring your house. It's not an accessory to the 401k plan. It's part of like a nervous system. Every deferral, match calculation, eligibility date, and compensation definition flows through that system first. When payroll changes, the plan changes whether anyone intended it or not. And the problem is that most employers think that it's the record keeper that is really running the 401k plan, and that's really not the case. The record keeper records what payroll tells it, but if the payroll company sends bad data, the record keeper is going to run with that bad data, and bad data leads to bad results. And payroll is the one who's the arbiter of who decides who's eligible, when they enter, what pay counts, and how much is deferred. And the record keeper is merely the historian, Josephus, if you may say, for those who know a little too about Roman history and the history of the Maccabees. Josephus Flavius, I think, was the writer of the Book of Maccabees. And that's what a record keeper does. It's recording history of what the payroll did. And if chapter 1 is wrong, then the whole book is a work of fiction. And payroll providers and 401k plans speak different languages, and that's a problem. Payroll thinks in terms of gross paid, net paid, taxes, PTO, and garnishments. And retirement plans think of 415 comp, W2, all that kind of stuff, true-up formulas, and entry dates. Those vocabularies are about as compatible as my Brooklyn English and somebody from Texas. I had a client whose new payroll company decided without asking anything that compensation meant W-2 wages only. The plan document included commissions and bonuses. An entire year of matching, is completely wrong, and that's the problem. And eligibility for a 401k plan kind of becomes like the Bermuda Triangle. Eligibility rules are where payroll conversions disappear without a trace. Plans have nuanced requirements, immediate eligibility for some employees, 1 year with 1,000 hours for others, different rules, and all that kind of stuff. Payroll systems are built for simplicity, not philosophy. I've seen new hires allowed in too early, veterans locked out too long, and part-timers misclassified in a way that would make an IRS agent grin like he found the $20 bill on a sidewalk. Each error produces, fixes, corrective contributions, and all that stuff. And, you hate to hear the word, but, when there's a corrective contribution, it always starts with the word unfortunately. And there's no really good, happy ending. And, of course, we have that old deposit myth that I think that some plan providers and plan sponsors still think that you have the 15th day of the following month to get the money in. And, that worked well in the time where, everything that was done by check, before ACH, before internet, doing everything. The most miserable person I ever worked for, he would have like a set of FedEx packages with checks for deposits. It would sit on his desk. These days, there really is no reason why plan sponsors can't get that money in within a couple of days. That's just the nature of it. And, DOL's simple rule, deposit them as soon as they can be segregated from the employer's assets. Not when the payroll system gets comfortable. Not after a few test cycles. You have a payroll rep telling a client that 10 business days was industry standard. Maybe in an industry where they really enjoy paying 5330s and excise taxes and all that kind of stuff. Late deposits lead to lost earning calculations and filings that feel like a root canal without anesthesia. The DOL does not accept the vendor was new as a hallmark card excuse. Then we got the problem with the match formula. Matching contributions are where conversions become standard routines. Plans have per payroll period matches with annual true-ups, tiered formulas, safe harbor requirements, and limits tied to definitions buried deep in the document. Payroll systems love straight lines, but 401k plans resemble, modern expressionist art, kind of like Jackson Pollock. You can watch, I've seen conversions where, the true-up formula is turned into a flat pay per payroll match, and employees who front-loaded deferrals were shortchanged for almost 2 years. And, if if the world was fair and equal and all that kind of stuff, we would only have annual matches. But I understand the need for payroll period matches to see people defer and get a match and all that stuff. But it just causes a whole host of headaches. Next, we got the control group issue. If your company has related entities or an ownership chart that looks like a family tree from Dallas, payroll is going to have an issue. Retirement plans have to treat certain related businesses as one employer. Payroll systems treat them as separate islands. There have been issues where their subsidiaries excluded, shared employees counted twice, and owners treated like brand new interns. It's like using a bicycle GPS to navigate a tractor trailer through Manhattan. Next, we have the triangle of confusion. Payroll switch creates like a triangle, where you have the payroll provider, record keeper, and TPA. And they're all, kind of pointing at each other. Payroll provider is saying, well, it's the record keeper. The record keeper is pointing at payroll. TPA is approving all this. And, the plan sponsor just stands in the middle of there, wondering why something that sounded really simple now requires aspirin and possibly a lawyer. Without a quarterback, usually the TPA or a seasoned advisor, the mistakes become permanent residents. Testing is certainly cheaper than apologies. Smartest dollar that a plan sponsor could spend during a payroll conversion is on testing. Running one parallel payroll cycle costs time. Fixing a year of mistakes is far more costlier. Sample employees should be walked through the new system like crash test dummies before anything goes live. Compensation definitions need to be compared line by line with the plan document, not with the payroll provider or salesperson's memory. A conversion without testing is like performing surgery without an x-ray. You might get lucky, but hope is not a sound fiduciary strategy. Payroll companies, the problem is they try to sell you easy, and retirement plans require accurate information. These two concepts rarely share, a common nexus. Switching payroll isn't wrong, but assuming the 401k plan will be obediently follow is just pure fantasy. The plan is like a toaster and more like a temperamental classic car. You change one part without understanding the whole machine, and you'll be stranded with a repair bill that can fund a small wedding. The only sensible order is if you're changing payroll providers, call your TPA first, and your record keeper second, and last you call the salesperson who promised seamless integration. Which that was always the big get for hiring a payroll provider, is that you would get seamless integration if you used one of the two big payroll providers. But what they don't tell you is that they offer that seamless integration with their competitors in the TPA world, because it's not as important as they think it is. But the 401k world, payroll isn't just payroll. It's the engine, the steering wheel, and, sometimes the airbag. And if you don't swap those out while driving, you may enjoy surprises that begin with the word unfortunately. Sponsors who respect that reality survive conversions with nothing more than mild indigestion. Those who don't get an evaluation that tuition certainly can't refund. So, it's really, as we get more and more integrated with technology and whatnot, we're just starting to see that payroll and compensation is the engine that, kind of fails. You have a vehicle. Recently, I had issues. I drive old cars, 2012 since the hurricane, and recently the Mazda, driving it, battery light switches on, and that's no good. And I'm by Riverhead near the Costco, ready to make a turn, and the car just stops. And it turns out it was the guy from AAA is like, oh, it's the alternator, and it wasn't. The battery was dead, but it wasn't the alternator. It was the alternator wiring, the belt, the alternator belt. Which failed, which, back in the old days, belts, fan belts and all that stuff would fail, 75, 100,000 miles, and now they don't fail. So, this is what happens, and it's certainly an issue. This is what we're learning, that payroll is such a bigger issue with plans. Hello.
Hey, Ary, Adam, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. All right, then.
Sorry for the interruption. These things happen, but that's what happens when you record a podcast and your buddy from Empower is talking to you about some legal work that they have to refer you. So you have to answer the call. So I apologize for that. And this is a kind of shorter episode of that 4K podcast. I apologize, but it's just I was able to get my points out in about 15 minutes. So go sign up that 4K site for the Chicago and Denver events, and of course the books are available on Amazon, and they're available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback. And tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of that 4K podcast. Take care.